The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Gala reflected in Asha Mehta's eyes as she stood at the entrance, clutching her handmade invitation between trembling fingers. At 32, she was finally here, the fashion event of the season where careers were made or destroyed with a single nod from industry titans. Invitation? A tall security guard extended his hand, eyebrow raised at her modest black dress. No designer label, no embellishments, just clean lines and perfect stitching that only a trained eye could appreciate. Yes, of course, Asha passed over the card, feeling the stares from the glittering crowd. She was a nobody among somebodies, a commoner in the court of fashion royalty. From across the room, Vivienne Montgomery, editor-in-chief of Style Elite and the uncontested queen of the fashion world, watched with predatory interest. At 54, Vivienne had built an empire on the backs of talented young designers who mistook her mentorship for kindness. Her silver hair was pulled into a severe bun, emphasizing her sharp features and perpetual look of disapproval. "Who let the seamstress in?" Vivienne's voice carried deliberately across the marble floor as Asha walked past. Titters rippled through the crowd. "Darling, the service entrance is around back." Asha froze, heat rushing to her face. She had anticipated coldness, but not this naked hostility. "I'm not staff," she managed, voice steadier than her knees. "I'm here representing Threadbare Studios." Vivienne's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched higher. "That little basement operation, how quaint. Tell me, does your studio even have running water, or do you wash the fabrics in the river like your grandmother?" More laughter erupted around them. Asha felt her throat tighten. This was supposed to be her moment, the culmination of 15 years of work, not another humiliation. She searched the crowd for a friendly face and found none, only amused smiles and phones surreptitiously recording her discomfort. "Actually," she started, but Vivienne had already turned away, dismissing her entirely. "Security, please ensure our unexpected guest doesn't disturb the real designers." Vivienne waved a manicured hand. "We wouldn't want her getting ideas above her station." As the security guard approached, Asha caught sight of herself in one of the many mirrors that lined the hall. In her simple black dress, she looked like a shadow against the kaleidoscope of designer wear. But shadows, she reminded herself, were resilient, and sometimes they were the only things that remained when the bright lights finally dimmed. The sewing machine hummed under Asha's fingertips as fabric smoothly transformed into art. 5 years earlier, before everything fell apart, this had been her life at Montgomery Designs, creating beauty under the mentorship of Vivienne Montgomery herself. "You have a gift," Vivienne had told her then, examining a neckline Asha had redesigned. Raw, untrained, but unmistakable, like finding a diamond in a coal mine. Back then, Asha had glowed under the praise, not recognizing the insult nestled within the compliment. A coal mine. That's how Vivienne had always seen her, talented but unrefined, a product of her humble beginnings. The daughter of Indian immigrants who ran a small alterations shop in Queens, Asha had learned to sew before she could properly write. While other children played with toys, she played with patterns, creating miniature wardrobes for her dolls from fabric scraps. Her parents had dreams of her becoming a doctor or lawyer, but fabric spoke to Asha in ways science and law never could. When she won a scholarship to Parsons School of Design, it seemed like the universe was confirming her path. And when Vivienne Montgomery personally selected her for an internship at Montgomery Designs straight out of school, Asha believed she'd finally escaped the shadow of her background. "You're not like the others," Vivienne would say as Asha worked late nights, perfecting collections that bore Vivienne's name. "They're born into this world, you're fighting your way in, that hunger is your advantage." For 4 years, Asha poured her soul into Montgomery Designs, eventually becoming the lead designer for their accessible line, clothing meant to bring high fashion to everyday women. While Vivienne focused on couture that only the elite could afford, Asha quietly revolutionized their ready-to-wear collections, increasing sales by 40%. Then came the betrayal. Asha, meet Camille. Vivienne had introduced the slim blonde woman with casual indifference. "She'll be shadowing you for a few weeks." Camille Dubois, with her perfect French accent and connections to Parisian fashion houses, quickly became Asha's shadow indeed. Always watching, always taking notes, always asking about Asha's inspirations and techniques. "We're friends, aren't we?" Camille had said over late-night takeout as they finalized the spring collection. "I've never met someone so genuine in this industry." Asha had opened up, sharing her vision for democratizing fashion, for creating clothes that made women feel powerful regardless of their bank accounts. Camille had listened, fascinated, as Asha sketched concepts for a revolutionary new collection that merged cultural influences with sustainable practices. 3 weeks later, Asha was called into Vivienne's office. "We're restructuring," Vivienne had said without looking up from her desk. "Your position has been eliminated." When Asha returned to her desk, security watching as she packed her belongings, she saw Camille already installed in her former office, surrounded by Asha's sketches, now labeled with Camille's name. "It's just business," Camille had whispered with a pitying smile as Asha was escorted out. "You understand." 6 months later, Montgomery Designs launched their acclaimed Global Horizons collection, Asha's concepts, her designs, her vision, with Camille Dubois hailed as a visionary. And Asha, she retreated to her parents' shop, nursing wounds that wouldn't heal and watching from afar as her stolen work paraded down runways to critical acclaim. The Metropolitan Gala continued around Asha like a fever dream. After Vivienne's public dismissal, she had retreated to a corner, trying to become invisible. But invisibility wasn't in the cards tonight. "Isn't that the copycat?" The whisper came from a group of influencers, their phones perpetually angled for the perfect selfie. The one who claimed Montgomery stole her designs. God, she's still on about that. It's been, what, 3 years? 5, Asha thought but didn't say. Pathetic, a male fashion blogger with immaculately styled hair sneered in her direction. At Fashion Truths did a whole exposé on her. Apparently, she tried to steal from Montgomery's archives and pass the designs off as her own. Asha felt her chest tighten. The lies had spread far and wide after her dismissal. Vivienne's PR machine had ensured that. When Asha had tried to speak out about the theft of her work, Montgomery Designs' legal team had threatened her with everything from defamation to theft of intellectual property. "I don't understand why security doesn't just remove her," someone else chimed in. "This is embarrassing for everyone." As if on cue, a security guard approached. "Miss, I need to see your invitation again." Asha presented it once more, hands steady despite the humiliation burning in her stomach. "Is there a problem?" "We've received reports that you may have obtained this invitation through improper channels." The guard's diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise the accusation. "That's absurd. I'm here representing Threadbare Studios. We were invited to showcase in the Emerging Designers segment." A ripple of laughter spread through the now-watching crowd. "There must be a mistake." The guard's voice was apologetic but firm. "Threadbare Studios isn't on our list of participants." From across the room, Vivienne watched the spectacle with a champagne flute poised at her lips, Camille Dubois at her side like a faithful shadow. "You can check with the organizers," Asha insisted, feeling the situation slipping out of her control. "We were selected 3 months ago." The guard spoke into his earpiece, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. According to the committee, your studio's invitation was rescinded last week due to quality concerns." The humiliation was complete. Around her, phones recorded every moment of her downfall, the hashtag fashion fraud already trending as onlookers live tweeted her disgrace. "Quality concerns," Asha repeated, incredulous. "That's impossible. We weren't notified of any change." "Perhaps your business email is as outdated as your fashion sense," Vivienne suggested, gliding closer like a shark sensing blood. "Fashion waits for no one, darling, not even desperate little copycats." Camille covered her mouth in mock scandal, eyes shining with delight at Asha's humiliation. "Oh, Asha, you didn't actually come thinking you'd be allowed to display, did you? That's adorable." Social media influencers circled like vultures, their camera flashes punctuating each moment of her humiliation. "I've seen her designs," one fashion YouTuber announced to his live stream. "Literal rip-offs of Montgomery's Global Horizons collection, the audacity to show up here." It wasn't true, none of it was true, but truth was a luxury Asha couldn't afford, not against Vivienne's empire of influence. As security began to escort her toward the exit, Asha caught sight of Helena Kim, once her closest friend at Montgomery Designs. Their eyes met across the room. Helena quickly looked away, turning her back on Asha's disgrace. Some betrayals, Asha realized, cut deeper than others. "Wait, Asha's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd as security guided her toward the exit. She stopped, planting her feet firmly on the polished marble floor. 5 years of being silenced. 5 years of watching her work paraded under someone else's name. 5 years of rebuilding from nothing while her reputation was systematically destroyed. Enough. If I'm being removed, I think the attendees deserve to know why Threadbare Studios' invitation was really rescinded. She pulled a small USB drive from her clutch, especially since it has nothing to do with quality and everything to do with this. The security guard hesitated, glancing toward Vivienne, who had gone very still. "Miss, please don't make this more difficult." "Raj," Asha called out to a young man hovering near the audiovisual setup, "I believe you owe me a favor." Raj, a technical assistant who had once interned at her parents' shop while studying computer science, met her eyes across the room. A moment of understanding passed between them. "Don't you dare," Vivienne hissed, but it was too late. The massive screens around the gala, meant to showcase designer collections, suddenly flickered to life. Security released Asha's arm as confusion spread through the crowd. On the screens appeared a split view. On one side, Asha's original sketchbook, dated and notarized 5 years earlier. On the other, Montgomery Designs' Global Horizons collection. The similarities were undeniable, not just in concept, but in specific details, down to the unique embroidery patterns Asha had adapted from her grandmother's saris. 5 years ago, I was fired without warning from Montgomery Designs. Asha's voice carried clearly through the now silent hall. 3 months later, my entire concept collection appeared on Paris runways under Camille Dubois's name. From the corner of her eye, she saw journalists pushing forward, phones recording every word. "That's absurd," Vivienne replied, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Anyone can create sketches after the fact and claim they came first." "Which is why I didn't just keep sketches," Asha replied calmly. "I kept emails." The screens changed to show dated correspondence between Asha and Vivienne, discussing the specific concepts that would later appear in the Global Horizons collection. And recordings. The final blow, audio from a meeting where Vivienne could be clearly heard instructing Camille on how to adapt Asha's concepts once she was gone. "She has no money for lawyers," Vivienne's voice echoed through the hall. "And no connections to fight back. Take what's useful and discard the rest. That's how this industry works." Camille's nervous laughter followed, but what if she speaks out? Who would believe her, a nobody from Queens, against Montgomery Designs, please? Vivienne's face had gone chalk white. Camille looked physically ill. "I didn't speak out then because you were right. I had no money for lawyers and no connections to fight back." Asha looked directly at Vivienne, but things change. From the back of the hall, a tall man in an impeccable suit stepped forward. Marcus Chen, founder of Nexus Ventures, one of the largest investment firms in the fashion industry. "Ms. Maida," he addressed her with quiet respect. "I believe this explains why Montgomery Designs has been so aggressive in trying to block your studio's showcase tonight." Asha nodded. They knew what would happen if my designs were seen alongside theirs. The truth would be obvious to anyone with eyes. The journalists were in a frenzy now, questions flying from all directions. Security had backed away entirely, unsure whose orders to follow in the chaos. Vivienne attempted to regain control. "This is ridiculous. A desperate publicity stunt from a failed designer. We'll be pursuing legal action for defamation." "I wouldn't recommend that," Marcus Chen interrupted smoothly. "Nexus Ventures has been conducting due diligence on Montgomery Designs for the past 6 months. Ms. Maida's evidence is just the tip of the iceberg." For the first time, real fear flashed across Vivienne's perfect features. The Metropolitan Gala had transformed from a fashion showcase to a public reckoning. Staff had brought chairs for the growing audience as Asha, now standing center stage, systematically dismantled the Montgomery empire with receipts that stretched back years. "This cease and desist letter was sent to me the day after I first questioned the similarities between my work and the Global Horizons collection," Asha explained as the document appeared on screen. "Note the date, 3 days before the collection was even publicly announced." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Fashion journalists typed furiously on their phones, live tweeting what was quickly becoming the scandal of the decade. How could she possibly have known about a collection that supposedly wasn't hers? Asked a reporter from Fashion Forward. Unless she created it, Marcus Chen finished. Ms. Maida, please continue. The evidence was damning in its comprehensiveness. Screenshots of text messages between Camille and Vivienne discussing how to clean Ashaz's designs of their origins. Photos showing Ashaz's original fabric samples alongside the final Montgomery products. Employment records revealing the systematic dismissal of anyone who questioned the collection's provenance. From the sidelines, Vivienne's lawyer desperately tried to intervene, but the tide had turned too dramatically. Even Montgomery Design's longtime legal counsel looked shaken by the mounting evidence. This isn't just about me, Ashaz continued, her voice gaining strength. Montgomery Designs has built its reputation on exploiting young, often immigrant designers who lack the resources to fight back. On cue, the screens displayed a list of names, dozens of former employees, each with similar stories of creative theft. They signed NDAs, Vivienne protested weakly. NDAs don't cover illegal activity, replied a woman who had pushed her way to the front. Melinda Parker, former legal counsel for the Fashion Federation of America, and what you've done, Vivienne, is textbook intellectual property theft. Melinda turned to address the crowd. As of this morning, the Federation has opened a formal investigation into Montgomery Design's business practices based on evidence provided by Ms. Maida and corroborated by 16 former employees. The crowd erupted. Influential designers who had minutes ago been sneering at Ashaz now backed away from Vivienne as if her disgrace might be contagious. You can't possibly believe this nobody, Vivienne spat, desperation creeping into her voice. That nobody built this? Marcus Chen gestured toward a new image on the screens. Threadbare Studios' latest collection, innovative, sustainable designs that seamlessly blended cultural influences without appropriation. While you were stealing ideas, Ms. Maida was quietly revolutionizing sustainable fashion practices and providing fair wages to immigrant artisans. With some help, Ashaz added, nodding toward Marcus. Nexus Ventures believed in Threadbare when no one else would. Understanding dawned on the audience's faces. This wasn't just about exposing theft, it was about revealing a new power structure in the making. 6 months ago, Nexus acquired a controlling interest in Threadbare Studios, Marcus explained. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, we've also acquired Montgomery Designs through a silent takeover. The gasps were audible. Vivienne looked as if she might faint. You can't, she began. We already have, Marcus replied calmly. Your board approved the sale last week. They were quite eager to distance themselves once we presented them with this evidence. On the screens appeared the final blow. Bank records showing millions transferred from Montgomery Designs accounts to offshore holdings controlled by Vivienne personally, money that should have gone to designers whose work she had claimed as her own. Not only creative theft, Melinda Parker noted, but financial fraud. The Federation will be cooperating fully with federal investigators. As security, now clearly following Marcus Chen's orders, approached Vivienne and Camille, the reality of their situation became clear to everyone watching. The empire built on stolen dreams was collapsing in real time, broadcast across social media for the world to witness. This is not over, Vivienne hissed as she was escorted toward the exit, the same path she had tried to force Ashaz down earlier that evening. Ashaz simply watched, neither gloating nor angry. You're right, Vivienne, it's not over, it's just beginning. The days following the Metropolitan Gala unfolded like scenes from a Greek tragedy. Vivienne Montgomery, once fashion's untouchable queen, watched her empire crumble through the window of her penthouse apartment, now surrounded by paparazzi hopping to catch a glimpse of her downfall. The board is demanding your immediate resignation, Vivienne's PR manager Elliot informed her as he spread newspapers across her coffee table. Each headline was more damning than the last. Fashion fraud, Montgomery's House of Lies exposed. Stolen DESIGNS, industry titan built empire on immigrant talent. From Queens to Queen, how ASHA MEHTA reclaimed her throne. Vivienne pushed the papers away, her hand trembling slightly. They can't force me out, I built that company from nothing. You built it on stolen work, Elliot replied, his loyalty evaporating in the face of career preservation. And the evidence is irrefutable. 3 major retailers have already pulled Montgomery lines from their stores pending investigation. Outside, protesters gathered, former employees emboldened by Ashaz's stand, holding signs that read "Pay back the DESIGNERS" and "No more fashion colonialism." Camille Dubois had already fled the country, reportedly seeking refuge in a family estate in southern France after her social media accounts were flooded with accusations and her design collaborations cancelled one by one. "We could issue another denial," Vivienne suggested weakly, pouring herself a third scotch despite the early hour. "Question her credibility." "Her credibility isn't in question anymore," Elliot interrupted. "Yours is, and with Nexus Ventures now controlling the company, your position is purely ceremonial until they formally remove you." As if summoned by his words, Vivienne's phone lit up with a text from Marcus Chen. "Board meeting, 3 p.m. Your presence is requested but not required for proceedings to continue." The stock price of Montgomery Designs had plummeted 40% overnight. Major celebrities who had once clamored to wear Montgomery originals were publicly donating their pieces to fashion history museums as examples of appropriation in the industry. Design schools were already updating their ethics curricula to include case studies of the scandal. By evening, Vivienne's remaining allies had jumped ship. Text messages went unanswered. Lunch invitations were rescinded. The fashion elite, always attuned to shifting winds, had collectively decided that Vivienne Montgomery was yesterday's news, a cautionary tale rather than an aspirational figure. At 3 p.m. sharp, Vivienne entered the Montgomery Designs headquarters for what she knew would be the last time. The boardroom where she had once reigned supreme was now filled with unfamiliar faces, Nexus representatives and legal counsel. "Ms. Montgomery," Marcus Chen greeted her without warmth, "we'll keep this brief." The terms were non-negotiable: immediate resignation, surrender of all company shares at their current, drastically reduced, value, and a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from discussing company matters, effectively silencing any defense she might mount in the court of public opinion. "And if I refuse?" Vivienne asked, summoning the last remnants of her imperious persona. "Then we proceed with public litigation," replied Nexus's lead counsel. "The criminal complaints filed by former designers will continue regardless, but corporate charges can be negotiated depending on your cooperation today." Vivienne looked around the table, searching for a sympathetic face and finding none. This room, where she had destroyed so many careers, was now the site of her own professional execution. With a hand that betrayed her age for the first time in decades, Vivienne Montgomery signed away her life's work. As she left the building, a final humiliation awaited. Asham Mehta was arriving for a meeting, surrounded by an entourage of excited young designers. Their eyes met briefly across the lobby. There was no triumph in Ashaz's gaze, no celebration of Vivienne's downfall, just quiet acknowledgement of justice finally served. That somehow was the greatest insult of all. 6 months later, the former headquarters of Montgomery Designs hummed with renewed energy. Where sterile minimalism had once reigned, vibrant textiles now draped the walls. The design floor, previously segregated by seniority with the most junior talents relegated to windowless corners, had been transformed into collaborative spaces where designers of all levels worked side by side. Asham Mehta, now creative director of the rebranded Threadbare Collective, moved through the studio with quiet confidence, stopping to review a sleeve pattern with an intern from the Bronx. "The structure is perfect," she told the young woman, whose hands showed the same calluses Ashaz had borne at her age. "But consider how it moves when the wearer reaches up. Fashion should never restrict movement." Nearby, Helena Kim, once Ashaz's friend at Montgomery, now her head of sustainable sourcing after apologizing for her silence during the years of Ashaz's exile, was training a team on ethical fabric sourcing. "The difference isn't just in how we design," Helena explained to the rapt audience, "but in how we create. Each piece tells a story of the hands that made it." The transformation of Montgomery Designs into Threadbare Collective represented more than a change in leadership. It was a revolution in how fashion could operate transparently, ethically, and inclusively. "The fall collection needs something," Asham mused during the afternoon design meeting. "It's technically perfect, but it's missing soul." "What if we incorporate embroidery techniques from the artisans we partnered with in Gujarat?" suggested Zoe, a recent design school graduate who had once been rejected by Montgomery for being too ethnic in her aesthetics. Traditional techniques with contemporary applications, Asha nodded, sketching rapidly, not as cultural tourism but as genuine collaboration. This was the philosophy that had drawn Marcus Chen and Nexus Ventures to Asha's vision in the first place. Not just beautiful clothes, but beautiful processes, a reimagining of how luxury could be defined by integrity rather than exclusivity. In the sample room, Asha's parents, now official advisors on craftsmanship, taught master classes to designers who had once sneered at immigrant fashion. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but there was no bitterness in the maida's instruction, only the quiet satisfaction of witnessing their daughter's vindication. When I first came to this building for an interview 15 years ago, Asha told a group of design students touring the facilities, the security guard asked if I was delivering lunch. She smiled at the memory that no longer had the power to hurt her. Last week, that same guard's daughter started our internship program. The Threadbare Collective had become more than a fashion house, it was a movement. Their manifesto, printed in every garment, promised transparency in sourcing, fair wages for all workers, and credit for every contributor from pattern makers to seamstresses. Each piece came with a QR code that, when scanned, revealed the entire journey of the garment: who designed it, who selected the materials, who constructed each element, and under what conditions. It was fashion with nothing to hide. The spring line has already sold out in pre-orders, Marcus informed Asha as they walked through the rooftop garden where employees grew herbs and vegetables for the subsidized company cafe. Retailers who wouldn't even take your calls 2 years ago are fighting for exclusive distribution rights. Asha nodded, pleased but not surprised. People were ready for change, they just needed to see it was possible. As the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, casting golden light across the studio, Asha found herself alone in what had once been Vivienne's office. The space had been completely redesigned, the cold marble replaced with warm wood, the intimidating desk swapped for a communal work table. On the wall hung a framed sketch, her original design for what became the Global Horizons collection, now properly credited and acknowledged as the inception of Threadbare's philosophy. Below it, a simple plaque read, "From erasure to empowerment, the journey continues." The Grand Palais in Paris glittered under the autumn sun, its glass ceiling casting rainbow prisms across the assembled fashion elite. After 18 months of transformation, the Threadbare Collective was unveiling its first official Paris Fashion Week collection, Origins, and the anticipation was palpable. Inside, the traditional runway had been reimagined as a circular space, with artisans working at the center, embroiderers, weavers, and pattern cutters demonstrating the techniques incorporated into the collection. The audience surrounded them, inverting the usual hierarchy to place craftsmanship at the heart of the experience. In the front row sat critics who had once dismissed Asha as a fraud. Behind them, young designers who had found in Threadbare a model for their own aspirations. And scattered throughout the crowd, the 16 former Montgomery employees who had risked their reputations to corroborate Asha's claims, now honored guests at fashion's most coveted event. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. Asha stood backstage, adjusting a final detail on the opening look, a modern interpretation of her mother's wedding sari, transformed into an evening coat that maintained the original garment's integrity while finding new expression. Around her, models from diverse backgrounds prepared to showcase the collection, not chosen merely for their physical attributes, but for their connection to the cultures honored in the designs they would wear. Each had worked with the design team to ensure respectful representation, their input valued rather than exploited. Ready, Marcus Chen appeared at her side, immaculate in a suit crafted by Threadbare's newly launched menswear division. "More than ready," Asha replied, her calm demeanor belying the magnitude of the moment. As the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the audience. Then, instead of pounding music, the show began with a single voice, Asha's mother singing a traditional folk song that had once lulled Asha to sleep in their tiny queen's apartment. The collection unfolded like a story, each piece building on the last to create a narrative of heritage honored and innovation embraced. Ethical luxury, Threadbare's signature, was evident in every garment, not through ostentatious branding, but through undeniable quality and thoughtful design. Critics who had come expecting to be merely impressed found themselves moved. There were actual tears among the typically stoic fashion press as the final look appeared, a wedding ensemble collaboratively designed by artisans from 6 different cultural traditions, symbolizing the strength found in unity rather than appropriation. When the models took their final walk, they were joined by the artisans from the center stage, the entire creative team walking together in a powerful statement about who really made the clothes. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Afterward, as champagne flowed and the collection received unanimous praise, Asha was called to the stage for the moment everyone had been waiting for, her address to the fashion world that had once exiled her. The room fell silent as she approached the microphone. 5 years ago, I was escorted from the Metropolitan Gala, told I didn't belong in this industry, she began, her voice steady. Today, I'm not here to say they were wrong. I'm here to say that the industry itself was wrong, built on exclusion rather than innovation, on taking rather than creating. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. At Threadbare, we believe true luxury isn't defined by price point or exclusivity, but by integrity. Integrity in how we design, in how we produce, and in how we credit those who bring our visions to life. From the corner of her eye, Asha caught sight of a familiar figure slipping into the back of the hall, Vivienne Montgomery, drastically changed from her glory days. Her silver hair hung loose around a face that seemed to have aged a decade in 18 months. Gone were the power suits and intimidating accessories, replaced by simple, elegant basics. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room. Asha gave a small nod of acknowledgement, not forgiveness exactly, but recognition of their shared humanity. Fashion has always been about transformation, Asha continued, unshaken. About taking raw materials and creating something new. Today, we're applying that same principle to the industry itself, transforming how we work, who we celebrate, and what we value. The audience, even those who had built careers within the old system, applauded. Change was no longer just coming, it had arrived, and Threadbare was leading the way. This collection is called Origins, not just because it honors where we come from, but because it marks the beginning of what we can become. A fashion industry that uplifts rather than exploits, that celebrates diversity of thought rather than conformity of aesthetic, that recognizes no one culture holds a monopoly on beauty or creativity. As Asha concluded her speech, the entire audience rose in another standing ovation. Fashion editors who had once refused her calls now jostled for interviews. Retailers who had canceled orders during the Montgomery scandal now offered exclusive partnerships. But the most meaningful moment came later, as the crowd began to disperse. A young woman barely 20, with calloused hands and determined eyes, approached Asha with a portfolio clutched to her chest. Ms. Maida, she began nervously, I've been working as a seamstress while saving for design school. Your story, her voice cracked slightly, it made me believe there might be a place for someone like me in this world. Asha looked at the young woman, saw herself 15 years earlier, full of dreams that seemed impossible. She took the portfolio gently. There isn't just a place for you, she replied, opening to the first sketch. There's a need for you, for your perspective, your experiences, your vision. As Asha reviewed the young designer's work, offering encouragement and honest feedback, she realized the true measure of her redemption wasn't in the accolades or the triumph over those who had wronged her. It was in changing the system enough that the next generation wouldn't need redemption stories at all, just opportunity. Outside the Grand Palais, the fashion world continued its eternal cycle of reinvention, but within its walls, a revolution had quietly succeeded. Not with scandals and takedowns, but with something far more powerful. A simple woman from Queens who refused to remain fired, and in the process, hired a new vision for an entire industry.